Initiatives that share a deeply held belief. The future of the world's tropical forests depends on the future of the people who call those forests home. Across our work, whether from government through Midagri, from civil society through Equal Rights and Cool Earth, or from the private sector leadership of the Mayankon Life Park, there is a common recognition that resilience, ecological recovery, and climate stability are only possible when forest frontiers communities can enjoy dignified, sustainable livelihoods. Before we begin, I want to note a couple of updates on our session. One of our partners, Michael Spoor, who leads the private sector contribution to the Mayankon Life Park, was unexpectedly unable to travel here today. He recorded his presentation so that you can hear his prepared remarks, and he will be joining us live and remotely from Peru for the roundtable discussion and questions immediately afterwards. Also, our opening speaker, Gabriela Quiros, Director of Natural Resources Evaluation and Climate Change of Peru's Ministry of Agricultural Development and Irrigation, has been called to state political discussions at 11:30, so will be leaving after her opening remarks and presentation. Returning to the session overview, taken together, the initiatives represented here today show what becomes possible when we focus the conversation on the peoples of the regions whose forests are so important. Poverty is one of the strongest forces driving degradation in the Amazon and other tropical regions. But when communities have the opportunity to support, the support, and the economic stability to build their lives in place through regenerative agriculture, fair markets, secure rights, and shared governance, then forest protection stops being a struggle and becomes the natural outcome of local prosperity. Our panel today demonstrates a shared conviction that empowering families in tropical forest regions is not just socially just, it is one of the most powerful climate and biodiversity strategies we have. These approaches don't compete, they reinforce each other. So thank you for joining us today. We hope this session offers a sense of what coordinated community-centered action can achieve and how these models can scale across the Amazon and the world. Gabriela, over to you.
Hello, good morning everyone. Today I'm here to introduce a significant and timeline project, the Mayankon Park of Life. As you can see, this is the major public and private initiative supported by the Peruvian Ministry of Agrarian Development and Irrigation. At its core, this initiative brings together key private and academic partners like Viridis Terra and Earth Innovation Institute and others to tackle one of the region's biggest challenges. First, the context and the background of this initiative. Let me establish the context. Why this initiative is so critical right now? Well, the reality is the Peruvian Amazon is facing an alarming rate of deforestation. As this slide illustrates, between 2001 and 2024, the region lost over 3.2 million hectares of forest. This translates to an average annual loss of nearly 139,000 hectares of humid forest, which is so important for our country. Specifically, the region of Ucayali, which is the focus of our intervention with this initiative, is one of the hardest hit areas, registering 34,000 hectares of forest loss in 2024 alone. this is the urgent problem that we are seeking to address. Furthermore, this deforestation has a direct and significant impact to Peru's national climate footprint. What this slide shows is the data from Infocarbono, which highlights a critical fact. As of 2019, the conversion of forest areas into agricultural land, often through logging and slash and burn practice, combined with land use change, accounted for nearly half, 48%, of Peruvians' total annual greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, it is clear that addressing deforestation in the Amazon is not an environmental issue. Also, it is Peru's single most important climate mitigation strategy. So, to respond this challenge, the Meyakon initiative has established 3 clear objectives. First of all, to restore these degraded areas to drive sustainable development as a consequently adapt to climate change. The second is to directly reduce deforestation, which is, as we just saw, is the main contributor to greenhouse gases emissions. And the third, and perhaps most importantly, to improve the income and living conditions for the rural families in the region. Regarding the beneficiaries of our focus is on 1,000 families located in the K districts of Nueva Riquena, Campo Verde, and Yarinacocha. Moving on, I would like to show you how this initiative is governed because its structure is the key to this success. As this diagram illustrates, this is not a traditional top-down project. It is managed through multi-stakeholder in a technical table. This table brings together the private enterprise, organizations, agricultural producers, public sector, academia, and the international cooperation. So this collaborative approach ensures the project has environmental, economy, and social characteristics, all aimed at one central objective: promoting the sustainable development and environmental recovery of family farming in the Peruvian Amazon. So this is also the structure that we take in Meyakon project. So now let's look at some results that we expect to achieve with this project. We measure our impact in 3 main areas. So first of all, on the environmental side, we are targeting the reforestation of 26,000 hectares, which is the project to capture 7 million tons of CO equivalent. Economically, the goal is to double the household income for the 1,000 families and achieve for formalization of 70% of their agricultural activities. And finally, this is very important, the social impact. By improving economy stability, we aim to improve access to health, education, and adequate housing that directly contribute to the poverty reduction. So, in conclusion, the Meyakon Park of Life is far more than just a local environmental project. It is comprehensive initiative that directly contributes to Peru's national climate goals, specifically with the NDCs. So it does this by reducing emissions from deforestation, restoring ecosystems, and enhancing the climate resilience of rural communities. As Peru and the world look ahead to critical events like COP30 in the Amazon, the Mayacon initiative serves as a powerful and replicable model for regional climate governance, showing how public and private partnerships can turn climate commitments into concrete action. So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. We will now pass over to the pre-recorded presentation from Michael, who, as I said earlier, was unable to travel at short notice. So please enjoy. Thank you.
It is an honor to be participating today and to be presenting the Mayancon Life Park, an initiative that represents not only a breakthrough for Peru, but which can serve as a model for how countries around the world can accelerate climate action, territorial development, and forest restoration in a way that is proven, replicable, and grounded in real human progress. But first, about the name. The name Mayancon was born out of our deep admiration, respect, and affection for the Shipibo-Conibo people of the region. In their native language, it means green land. I'd like to begin with a simple idea. Peru can become one of the world's great climate-positive nations in the coming decade, not because of a theory, not because of hope alone, but because of a pattern that we have seen repeat itself in other countries around the world that have already reached stage 4 of the forest transition. The Mayancon Life Park is built on that pattern. Peru has already achieved what many once thought impossible. 30 years ago, the Peruvian coast was a barren desert. Today, it is one of the world's most productive agricultural regions, a global powerhouse in fruit and vegetable exports. That transformation happened because Peru invested in infrastructure, in irrigation, in governance, and in the modernization of agricultural value chains. The lesson is simple. When Peru chooses to transform a landscape, the results can be extraordinary. But if we turn from the coast to the Amazon, we see a different pattern. Not natural desert, but man-made deserts. Land cleared, burned, exhausted, and abandoned while more is then cleared. As Gabriela shared with us, about half of Peru's carbon footprint comes from this cycle of slash and burn migratory agriculture. More than 95% of deforestation is in events that are small scale, the signature of poverty, informality, and lack of alternatives. This is not industrial deforestation. This is the geography of exclusion. And it is precisely the kind of landscape that the forest transition framework helps us understand. Many in this room may not be familiar with the forest transition curve. So let me briefly explain what this curve actually shows. The forest transition is not an environmental theory. It is a socioeconomic pattern, a 4-stage sequence that has repeated itself over and over around the world. In stage 1, the frontier phase, land is abundant, poverty widespread, and clearing forest is often the only path to survival. Deforestation rises because families lack alternatives. In stage 2, the expansion phase, agriculture expands, informal markets spread, and populations grow. Deforestation reaches its peak, not because people want to cut trees, but because the economy is still informal and unstable. This is where Peru is today. In stage 3, the transition phase, the turning point happens. Economies formalize, governance improves, value chains become permanent, farmers gain stable incomes and begin to intensify on existing land rather than clearing new areas, deforestation begins to fall. In stage 4, the recovery phase, this is where the forests return. The land use sector becomes a net absorber of carbon. Countries like Japan, France, Italy, the United States, South Korea, all are in stage 4. This is not a theory. This is a repeated global pattern. And the message for Peru is simple. If we accelerate the underlying economic and governance transitions, we will accelerate the forest transition. Reaching stage 4 isn't just possible, it is inevitable if we invest properly. To understand Peru's place on this curve, we must recognize something unique about our geography. 88% of Peruvians live on the desert coast and in the Andes, areas that contain more urbanization, formality, and often are more economically integrated. But virtually all of Peru's forests lie east of the Andes, in a frontier region that remains disconnected from that prosperity. This creates a paradox. As a nation, Peru resembles a middle or upper middle income country, but its land use emissions resemble those of a country still in stage 1 or stage 2. Peru is not behind because of its institutions or its people. It is behind because our forests sit where the national economy has not yet arrived. This makes Peru's challenge unique, but also its opportunity. Peru does not need to modernize its entire national territory to reach stage 4. It needs to modernize the frontier. And that is exactly what the Mayancon Life Park is designed to do. Before describing the Mayancon Life Park plan, let me show you what is already working today. This slide shows the evidence. Ocho Sur, the company that I lead, has already been investing in this transformation. Since 2016, we have invested $160 million in long-term investments. We provide 2,000 formal jobs and are the largest employer in Ucayali. We buy goods and services from 500 local suppliers, many of whom we have helped formalize. More than 22,000 people, including both indigenous and non-native neighbors, now benefit directly and indirectly from our investments in healthcare, education, clean drinking water, and connectivity. We are the region's leaders in renewable energy, both producing more and using more than anyone else. Our industrial operations are 100% circular and energy self-sufficient. Our protected reserves and reforestation areas continue to grow and now protect more than 2,500 hectares of natural and recovered forests. This is not theory. This is the real-world result of formality, investment, and modern management arriving in an informal frontier. And it is the foundation of the Mayancon Life Park. The Mayancon Life Park builds on this proven foundation. It envisions a mosaic of agroforestry systems, biodiversity corridors, restored soils, family farms, and conserved forests that work together as one living landscape. This is how we restore degraded land while increasing productivity and stability for families. On this slide, you see the architecture of the Mayancon Life Park. At the center is a model that integrates private sector investment and management, operators delivering agroforestry, restoration, and sustainable value chains, smallholders and communities receiving technical assistance and market access, the public sector providing legal certainty and alignment of public investment. Below them, you see the governance structure. A territorial roundtable brings together all actors, and a project management office ensures efficiency, transparency, and a coherent decision-making process. This is not a project. It is a replicable territorial model. To build this, we are designing a $250 million blended finance structure for the first decade. Public investment, development banks, carbon finance, and private investors each contribute what they do best. Over the next 25 years, the Mayancon Life Park will deliver 26,000 hectares of restoration, 7 million tons of CO2 captured. Household incomes doubled, 70% formalization of agricultural activities, a replicable governance model for other Amazonian regions. But perhaps most important, we create permanence, permanent land use, permanent income, permanent governance, and permanent opportunity. And permanence is the enemy of deforestation. What you see on this slide is the essence of why the Mayankon Life Park matters for the climate. We're starting with land that is, in many places, almost completely degraded. Bare soils, exhausted fields, and abandoned clearings. But the moment the Mayankon Life Park begins to operate, that landscape starts moving in a very different direction. Every component of the model, the enrichment of remnant forest patches, the creation of new forests, the establishment of agroforestry systems, and even the permanent agricultural areas, all of them are net carbon capturing land uses. This is critical. There is nothing in the Mayankon Life Park that emits carbon from land use change. Every hectare becomes part of a regenerative engine that steadily increases carbon stocks year after year. The bars you see rising over time represent that cumulative process, a landscape that today is a source of emissions, becoming, through deliberate design, a long-term carbon sink that grows stronger for decades. This is exactly the kind of model that the world needs, one that restores biodiversity, strengthens rural economies, and makes the land a partner in climate stabilization rather than a driver of emissions. When Peru reaches stage 4, as 87 other countries already have, we will cut Peru's total national emissions by half. Not through sacrifice, not through limiting development, but through development done properly. This will move Peru into the top 10% of climate positive nations. And it will send a message to the world. You do not need to choose between prosperity and forests. If you get the economics right, the forests return. Let me close with this. The Mayankon Life Park is not based on a theory of how forests might behave. It is based on the observed reality of how 87 countries have already transitioned from deforestation to restoration through economic transformation. Peru has the land, the people, the biodiversity, the culture, and the will. What it needs now is a model that brings sustainable development to its frontier and creates a future where forests recover because people flourish. There are few better ways to honor the people of our region than to lift them up and enable them to regreen their lands. That is the promise of the Mayankon Life Park. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to invite Patrick Brown, Dr. Patrick Brown, up from Equal Right, their Executive Director, for the next presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stefan, for the introduction and also for organizing today's event. Done a fantastic job. Is there slides in the ones I sent? Do we have those? Do you know? Or move mic closer, please. Yep, got it. Is a slide deck in there? Or yeah, you did get it. Okay. No. No? Okay, cool. We'll see if we can find them. So I am the Executive Director of Equal Right, and we're a global non-profit organization that works to advance climate justice, equity, and human rights through the advocacy of a universal basic income. Our name, Equal Right, comes from our belief that everyone in the world has a right to a share of the world's wealth and resources, and that UBI, an unconditional, direct, individual cash payment, is the best way to realize that goal. We do quite a lot of things. We look at financing solutions on a global scale for basic income. We look at how direct cash transfers can be part of an agenda around more equitable climate finance. And one of the big projects that we've been working on since the last COP, since Baku, is the Cash for Conservation movement. And this is a network of NGOs, researchers, indigenous organizations, international institutions that have come together to look at how we can advance unconditional cash within the context of conservation. So we're not talking here about conditional PES programs or market-based instruments, carbon credits, biodiversity credits. We're talking about direct, unconditional cash transfers, including individual transfers, also including very unconditional forms of community grants, where there is trust and autonomy given to communities, given to individuals in ecologically vulnerable areas to say, you know, we should just be giving money directly because these communities know what to do with it. We shouldn't be making them jump through hoops to receive climate finance. But it's also couched in the understanding that poverty and environmental degradation go hand in hand. And when people in forested communities, in vulnerable ecosystems, have to put food on the table, often they have to rely, through no choice of their own, on extractive industries, whether that is forestry, mining, poaching, whatever. And that is a situation of economic necessity, right? So by providing upfront cash, by alleviating poverty at source, because poverty is a lack of cash, simply put, you can try and break that conservation and poverty nexus. So that's part of the thinking. Oh, we have a brilliant, great. Well, on to the next slide there, please. So that's a little bit of what I've mentioned here. I should say as well, the founders of the group, it's not just Equal Right. We also have our friends at Cool Earth. Isabel is going to be speaking after me a bit about their work on cash for conservation, conservation basic income in Peru, and also Give Directly. I'm actually on their badge at COP, and they're the world's largest NGO provider of direct cash transfers. They work primarily in Africa. So there's various different modalities and ways of thinking about cash for conservation. The poverty alleviation angle, reducing pressure on extractive activities and livelihoods is one of those. But I think another very powerful one, and one we maybe need to talk about more, is that in many cases communities simply deserve this money. You can frame it as compensation, as a reward, as a catalyst for existing conservation efforts, whatever way you want to frame it. But these are communities who have used in centuries of knowledge and have established much more symbiotic ways of living with nature than many of us in the global north experience. And all of that work, that labor that they put in, all of that knowledge, it's often unremunerated, it's unvalued in terms of our mainstream economic systems, but the value that it has is immense. Billions and billions and billions, but we don't fund it on that scale. And if you look at, for example, the TFFF system, which, if it does what it says and it generates new climate finance, then I'm all for that. It does have some challenges, I think, in terms of operation, in terms of scale. But if you look at the amount that it's projecting to make for local communities, at a minimum, it's about 800 million a year, which is way off what we need. UNEP-FI have estimated we need 216 billion by 2030 to properly protect forests, and the TFFF in total globally for both country share and IPLC share is 4 billion a year. So still way off what we actually need, and also unclear in terms of how that money will actually trickle down to communities. So what we're saying in the Cash for Conservation group is let's look at how we can build out direct ways to channel cash to communities. Go to the next slide there, please. This is a map showing all of the different places that there are cash for conservation projects, either in action in places like Peru, Liberia, Rwanda, and also some projects that we are planning to kick off. Oh, great! I've got a clicker. Planning to kick off in the next in the years ahead. So in places like Colombia, Kenya, parts of Asia as well. So it's a truly global movement. It is quite nascent. It is quite new. We're still developing what the best modalities and mechanisms are to get cash to different types of communities, to different types of ecosystem, the different types of wraparound services and programs that we provide as part of those programs. But it's very exciting work, because I think what we have here is a genuine alternative to many of the direct climate finance solutions that are out there at the moment, and also something that I think can be very complementary to what's already happening. And I look at the work that Life Systems and Ocosur are doing in Peru, and I do wonder, how could a direct cash transfer to the communities that you're working with catalyze and supercharge those existing efforts to spur that fourth stage of the transition that Michael was talking about? Because we know from well over a decade of really high quality RCT data on unconditional cash transfers, both regular monthly transfers and lump sums. When you invest directly in communities with cash, they're more likely to diversify their livelihoods, to invest in productive assets, to be able to say no to extractive and harmful forms of work in whatever shape and way that might be. So I think it could be a very powerful enabler for these sort of initiatives. Next slide, please. This is just one example of a project that our friends at Give Directly are developing in Liberia, and I know Isabel's going to mention experience in Peru as well, which is slightly more relevant perhaps for this panel. But in Liberia, Give Directly are running a program it's running for a year, so it's ending this month. We'll get analysis of the program soon. It's in partnership with the government in Liberia and some other NGOs. And it involves 500 households, so a few thousand people across 18 communities, and they're receiving monthly cash transfers of $60, as well as a $400 lump sum per household. And that is really to both then meet essential basic needs through the monthly transfer, but also to provide a larger transfer that can be invested in livelihood diversification, productive assets, etc. There's also a complementary fund that is working with communities to sort of adopt and pledge to take care of forest, and they get a $1.50 cash grant per hectare as well to use for community projects. There's a QR code where you can read more about that project there. Next slide, please. And then just some thoughts from Equal Ride in terms of how we make this happen, how we scale it up. So in terms of the global picture, conservation basic income, which is one of the terms we use under the Cash for Conservation banner, would cost 350 billion annually. So quite a high amount, but that's for every single person living in a conservation area in low and middle income countries. So it's a huge scale, to give you the idea of what we're thinking about. But if you did a similar project like that in Brazil, targeted in conservation areas or to indigenous peoples, it would be 1.3 billion and 2.3 billion respectively annually. Not actually a huge amount if you consider the size and the GDP of a country like Brazil. And indeed, we believe that something like that could be funded relatively easily through some minor fiscal changes in Brazil. For example, a relatively small carbon tax could probably support that sort of program. And we're also developing some very innovative financial models to fund basic income at the local level. So in Kenya, we are looking to establish an endowment fund with philanthropic capital that can invest in an ESG portfolio, generate a return, and then that return funds an annual climate dividend, another word for a basic income, to everyone in a community conservancy in Kenya. But crucially, the level of the payment would be indexed to local ecological indicators. So if soil quality improves, if grassland quality or cover improves, then the level of the payment would increase slightly. So it creates a positive incentive to be engaged with conservation without hard conditionalities. So we think that could be quite an innovative model that we're trying to get off the ground as a permanent financing solution for direct cash transfers. I think that's everything from myself. Just check the next slide. I don't think it's... Yeah, because that's just some of the projects that we're developing in more detail, but we'll skip over that and finish there. I'm sure I'm at time. And I'll pass over to Isabel.
Okay, perfect. First, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm Isabel Felandro. I'm the head of programs of Cool Earth, representing here the organization. And for those that haven't heard about Cool Earth is an organization that has more than 20 years of experience working in transferring direct and flexible funds to indigenous and local communities. We have interventions in Peru, in the Amazon, in Papua New Guinea, in Cameroon, and so far we have support about almost 60,000 of people. With our work, we are protecting almost 1 million hectares of forests worldwide. And in those, well, those are the data I was just saying. And in those 2 almost decades of implementation, what has come very clear to us is like when the communities, the indigenous people have the resources and their self-determination and indigenous governance are respected, the forest is standing, you know. The rates of deforestations are lower. As you know, 1/3 of the remaining forest is in indigenous territories, and indigenous territories we can see the lowest rates of deforestation. So a lot of the work that we're doing is already backed by science. But what is really happening and what is the problem is like the climate finance architecture is not really acknowledging that. And only 1% of all of the climate funds that exist reach the indigenous people on the ground. So that's the problem that we're trying to address. That's why Cool Earth exists, and that's why we also are part of the coalition Cash for Conservation that you hear from Patrick, that we formed last year. And the idea is how we make possible to do this bureaucratic system more simple so indigenous people can access the money and the finance, how we simplify the process. And so that's something that Cool Earth has also been advocating for the last 2 years. And also everything that we are advocating is based on the evidence that we have in the projects that we have implemented in Peru, in Papua New Guinea, and Cameroon. Something important what's make our model difference is first, as I already said, as Patrick explained very well, we want to provide direct cash and flexible cash. So the communities are the one deciding how to use the money based on their own priorities, based on their own challenges. We don't go to impose solutions because we know the communities know better. So that's one of the pillars of the work that we do. And something also very important, and that is highlighted in this slide, is trust and co-design and implementation. So we have built relationships with those communities for many years, and everything we do is co-design, co-develop, co-monitor with our indigenous partners since the beginning until the end. I think that's how create the ownership and also makes everything they do more sustainable. And well, just some things about the work that we do, freedom and security for rainforest communities. So once, as Patrick was explaining before, you know, one of the main drivers of deforestation is poverty. So by providing a regular cash to the individuals living in the rainforest, they can resist. But something also very important that maybe is not talked enough, but I'm hearing more in this COP, and I see there is a switch, is like, also cash is part of the recognition of the work that indigenous people has been doing for millennials. No, it's not just us providing support, but recognizing about, you know, the conservation work that they are doing, and this is a way to support their livelihoods. But also now with the climate crisis, what we're seeing is that those communities on the front line of deforestation, they are also the communities on the front line of the climate crisis. So the impact of the climate crisis is directly affecting their livelihoods and also their efforts to conservation. So with cash for conservation and models like this, these communities not only can resist, but they also can uh, um, overcome all the challenges that comes with climate crisis. And so now I will just talk about the basic income pilot. So as you know, we have been running cash projects for over 20 years, but 2 years ago, we want to take our model a step further. So instead of giving to communities and to indigenous organizations, we want to try giving it to every individual in the communities. So this was inspired by the basic income movement, but with approach to conservation, because as you know, there are many other basic income pilots and projects running around the world, as the one you saw in the map that Patrick presented before. But the one we started 2 years ago was the first with that directly linked to conservation. So for us, it was not about testing if a model like this works, because we have been doing this for 20 years, and we know when people have cash in their hands, the forest is protected. But for us was more to prove that a basic income model can work in remote areas like the Amazon. No, it's a totally different landscape. So this model has been proven in urban cities, in Africa, in India, but nothing in the Amazon. So that's what we wanted to do. And the second thing that we want to test is how we deliver this model on a safety and ethical way. So what we did since the beginning, because we were starting from the scratch, we knew that we need to partner with indigenous organizations, and that's when we met our incredible friends from OMIASEC and ONAMIAB. I don't know if there is any Peruvian in the room now, but probably you have heard about those organizations. Those are women-led organizations, and together with Cool Earth, the three of us, we designed the pilot since the beginning. And this brought so incredible insights and learning for us to understand the challenges of working in a so challenging, environment as the Amazon rainforest in Peru. So about the pilot, this is just some inspiring quotes from people in the communities. So it's £2 per person, per 3 communities running for 2 years to test what I just explained before. And so far we are seeing incredible results. Of course, people with that money is supporting the basic needs, but we also seen like people is already having more time to spend with their families, with the community. And if you are familiar with the concept of the buen vivir, it's indigenous way of living that means, good living in their own language. So many of the money has been used to address that. So, communities, they already have their own plans, their own objectives, and with cash in their hands, they are able to meet those plans. And something great that we also see is like the community has more time also to participate in collective actions. Because at first we were a little bit worried, like the individual approach of this model might, be a little contradictory with the communal approach of the way of living of indigenous communities. But we were seeing is just adding up to that. People is saying that they feel happier, but also having more time, to work in reforestation, communal activities. The communities are also worried about droughts there, so they have been buying seeds to reforest the forest. So honestly, amazing outcomes that we're seeing, and all of them are being led by the communities. This is just pictures of the people that is working there. We have also been working, our communal staff are members from the OMIASEC and ONAMIAC indigenous communities. And of course, we have got a lot of attention from the international communities. We have been giving interviews to The Guardian, Monga Bay, Implement, because this is a very radical and innovative approach. You haven't seen anything like that in other contexts, so we're really proud that we are kind of leading the conversation about cash for conservation. And now the next step for Cool Earth is to see how we go from a pilot to a global movement. And that's why it's so important that we create this coalition together with Equal Rights and Give Directly, because what we want to do is to advocate for more models like this to be implemented all around the world. And I think that was my last slide, and I have some fact sheets here if you want to learn more about Cool Earth I'm going to be here also at the end, so you can just come to me and talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Isabel. We are now going to shift gears to our panel. We have 10 minutes left, so Victor, I'll ask you to be a little bit faster than planned. I'd like to invite our panelists, Michael, who was presenting with the pre-recorded presentation, will be joining us, as you can see on the screen. Professor Victor Santillan from the Pontificia Catholic University of Peru, advisor to the rectorate, will be our moderator. Victor, I will pass over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and welcome. First, I want to say very quickly, I have in my hands a special logo. Maybe someone remember what is this logo? The COP30. So 11 years have passed since COP20 in Lima, my city, 11 years in which we have made progress in climate action, actually, but more is still needed. And that is the reason why we are here. Because, as Michael said, Peru has the land, has the people, and the will. So in that context, I want to start to know more about this initiative with Patrick, with this question. Equal Rights advocates for the use of conditional cash for climate justice through the concept of a universal basic income. So how is a basic income fundamentally connected to social and economic justice for Amazonian communities? And in what way does this income security become the foundation for long-lasting climate integrity in the context of tropical rainforest resilience?
Thank you very much, Victor. And that's a question we could probably talk about here for a few hours. And I know I've only got a few minutes, so I'll do my best. I suppose to answer the first part of your question around how does basic income link to social and economic justice, well, the idea of equal right is believing that everyone has an equal right to a share of the world's wealth and resources, but we acknowledge that that is inequitably shared at the moment. That has been the result of centuries of exploitation, of unfair accumulation. It is very challenging to try and unpick all of that, but a basic income which would require significant structural changes to the way fiscal, potentially monetary policy works globally to fund it on a global scale, or indeed a national scale in many cases, would go some way to addressing those inequitable systems that have caused those issues. But on an individual level, I suppose we start from the position that no individual should be without basic economic security, that we live in a system where you require a certain level of material well-being to simply exist. And therefore, why is that material security not a right? We have the wealth. It exists. It's in the wrong places. We're doing a lot of thinking at Equal Right as well around how we redistribute that wealth through wealth taxes, financial transactions taxes, carbon taxes, how we do it on a sustainable basis through models like a global, national, or local commons fund. But I suppose that rights framing is really important. It's not just about basic income as a poverty alleviation tool, as an intervention, as a brief intervention. And I think to touch on your second question, which I think was more around sustainability, again, we don't just see basic income as a one and done poverty intervention. I think that separates us at Equal Right from maybe a lot of other organizations doing unconditional cash transfers or conditional cash transfers, right? Because we believe that this should be a foundational right, and we need to find the systems, the financial systems, the structures to make that happen. And we're beginning to develop that with pilots like we have in Peru, Liberia, Kenya, and other places. But ultimately, what we want to do is scale that. And we're looking at legislative pathways to do that. We're looking at financial pathways. We're looking at how things like the TFFF could be, we could leverage some of that money to direct that to direct cash payments. We're looking at how innovative fund mechanisms at the local level could do that. So we're trying to get the answers, and we're doing that as a group collectively on a global scale.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So, Isabel, please tell us, Cooler, as you mentioned, is renewed its work directly funding indigenous communities to protect endangered forests, an approach that has been referred to as a cash for conservation pilots. In that way, the community autonomy and trust in local knowledge proved to be the most effective form of conservation compared to more traditional models. And what is the potential of this approach to impact a country's climate action, for example, our NDC?
Well, I think for us it's very simple, no? We want to support the people that live in those indigenous territories, in those forests, as a way to contribute to the climate crisis, no? So probably I'm starting with the end of the question. So it's straightforward. It's a lot of data, as I said, that show the evidence like indigenous territories have the lowest rates of deforestation, and when people have their resources, and it is something that we have learned during this 20 years of experience, they have the resources, the cash, the data, the technology, and their self-determination and governance is respected, those projects can truly be transformative and sustainable in the future. So something that I think it's key for a cash for conservation model is to trust the communities know better what's good for them and for their territories and for the forest, you know. I've seen traditional conservation has always relied on top, no bottom models, like impose solutions. So what Cooler is trying to do, we don't come to imposing model. We come like allies and facilitators. We provide the resources that the communities need, and then the communities decide how to cover the basic needs. And then we also see that it's a multiplier effect, you know, because then they also invest in local economies, you know, in their own projects, and they also decide how to run their own conservation activities. And something that also is very important, probably is not mentioned enough, those communities are already, you know, facing the challenges of climate crisis, like forest fires, droughts, floods are increasing year by year, and they are not really receiving the support from governments or from the international community. So that resource, that cash can really support them with that. And in that way, we are protecting the forest and we are contributing to the NDCs. You know, I think it's very important that I feel that the conversation is shifting in this COP, and we have seen so many examples from indigenous leaders that have come here and show that they have already running projects led by indigenous communities, and they're claiming the governments to be recognized in the finance when they are implementing those in their territories.
Thank you, because as you mentioned, the action on the field, the action with the people, at the end is the best action, the real climate action. No, I'm not sure, but I think we have Michael from Zoom. So, Michael, please. My question for you is, the May Yankon Life Park is presented as an initiative where the biggest winner is the forest we never even touch. Could you explain, please, how this private sector approach within the framework of landscape scale governance and blended finance represents a sustainable model for forest protection in Peru? And in that sense, what regeneration metrics are used to validate this initiative as a measurable contribution to national climate action? Go ahead.
Thank you, Victor, for that question. And I'm glad to be joining you all. I'm sorry it has to be remotely. But the thing that is the common diagnosis that we have seen among all the presentations today is that deforestation is a symptom. It's not the disease. Many of us think of it as the disease, but it's actually a symptom. The underlying diseases in our part of the world, in Ucayali and places like Ucayali, the underlying diseases are poverty and disconnectedness and informality and low governance. And so to address those problems, we constructed the Mayankon Life Park as a public-private initiative that focuses on those underlying diseases. By creating a park where people can return from the frontier, from the places where indigenous lands are being invaded and where forests are being cleared, when people return from those areas to a place that was degraded long ago but is now being restored and returned to a place of prosperity and opportunity and dignity, we are addressing the underlying problem, the underlying disease that is evidenced in the symptom of deforestation. So we know that this is the best way to address the problem that we have in our part of the world. And from a measurability standpoint, Victor, the Mayankon Life Park is defined very clearly. It's 26,000 hectares. The baseline biodiversity and ecosystem that exists there today is easily measurable. And the components of what we are constructing in the Mayankon Park are also easily measurable. So this is, although it has significant benefits outside of the park, those are where some of the biggest benefits are. The most measurable ones will be inside the park, where we can track verified carbon units, where we can measure biodiversity and ecosystem recovery. So we believe that that by creating a public-private initiative that addresses those underlying causes of the symptom, then the motivation for deforestation simply disappears as people return to these areas. And this is why it's a replicable model, because we don't have to protect all 78 million hectares of the Peruvian rainforest, but we can offer dignified and attractive alternatives and prosperous lives to the 250,000 rural families that live in the Peruvian Amazon. That's an achievable goal.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much, Michael. We don't have so much time, but just to appreciate and thank you so much for your answers. I think just to summarize, economic and social justice for rainforest is the essence of climate integrity. I think that it's a main message that this kind of initiatives explores, made, and actually involve with the people. Thank you so much for this panel, and for the closing remarks, I give you the floor.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of our session. Please stick around for informal conversations.